You've been very quiet the whole time. Good. All right. All right, good evening, everyone. The time is now 4:02, so I will call to order our Wednesday, February 19th, 2025 meeting of the Capital Area Transportation Authority Board of Directors and ask our secretary to please call the roll. Here.
Kelly Blackwell. Here. Bill DeShane.
Here.
Chelsea Dollar.
Here.
Shannon Draheim. Mark Brebner.
Here.
Derek Milo. John Crush.
Here.
Jack Schmidt. Eric Tans.
Here.
Nathan Triplett.
Here.
Stephen Benghazi.
Here.
Edward Rogers.
Here. All right, thank you. That brings us to our next agenda item, which is public comment on agenda items. This is the time we set aside during each of our meetings to take comment from the public on items that are published on this evening's agenda. We ask that you please consider filling out a blue card to assist our secretary and that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And we will have a timer to assist you with that. I will call folks in the order in which I've received blue cards and then ask if there is anyone else who wishes to speak at this first public comment opportunity on agenda items. So we'll begin this evening with Deb Parrish. Deb?
I'll keep it really short because I want to hear all about the financial stuff we're going to hear today. Looking forward to hearing about the cameras on board the buses and the policies that will be in place in requesting copies of certain events. I've watched surveillance tapes in court trials, especially when the cameras are on the outside of the bus. They catch people. You never know where there's going to be a camera. Just wondering where the cameras will be placed. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, Deb. Our next commenter is Jeff, and Jeff, I can't read your last name, so I'm going to ask you to pronounce it so that I get it correctly. Go ahead.
Jeff McWhirter.
Thank you.
Jeff McWhirter, East Lansing resident, Gravity Works founder and chief operating officer. Good afternoon, members of the CATR board. I have lived in the greater Lansing area for 27 years. During that time, I've worked alongside with city leaders striving to grow jobs, especially in the tech sector. As someone deeply invested in this community, I've dedicated my career to helping organizations understand what it takes to create and retain tech jobs here in Lansing. I am here today because of the decision before you, Motion H, to award the website contract to California-based company Exemplify. This decision has broader implications beyond just the scope of this project. CATA is an essential institution in this community, and like many Lansing residents, my staff and my family use your services. As a local business, Gravity Works has had the pleasure with working with CATA for nearly a decade, supporting your digital needs with a deep understanding of your operations and your riders. The decision to award this contract to an out-of-state company that heavily relies on outsourcing labor overseas does not align with the broader goal of strengthening Lansing's economy. Every dollar spent with a local company stays within the community, supporting local workers, creating jobs, and reinvesting in our region. The cost proposal in the board packet does not tell the full story. Gravity Works as the incumbent included tools not explicitly listed in the RFP, but necessary for a successful rebuild, such as the CATA band book. Additionally, our maintenance quote was based on nearly a decade of historical data and mentions that CATA only pays for the hours it actually uses. The board should consider whether the proposal from Exemplify truly accounts for the full scope of ongoing costs or if unexpected costs will surface. If this decision was based on cost, I urge the board to ensure that all numbers are fully and fairly represented. If the decision was based on perceived capability, then I ask, what can we do to ensure that Lansing-based companies are recognized as having the skills and talents needed to handle projects of this scope? Gravity Works has the experience and expertise to deliver this project at the highest level, but if there were gaps in our proposal, I welcome the opportunity to learn what we could have done differently. Transparency and communication strengthen our community, and I hope that organizations like CATA will continue to create opportunities for local businesses to contribute. While this decision may not change this afternoon, my goal is to remind you that Lansing has companies fully capable of this work. And when future projects arise, I hope that local businesses will be given fair and full considerations, not just for the benefit of one contract, but for the long-term growth in our region. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Those are all the cards I've had submitted in advance. Is there anyone else who wishes to offer comment at this first opportunity on agenda items? All right, seeing none, then we'll move to agenda item number 3, Chair's comments. I have just 3 quick items for the board this afternoon. The first is we've had requests for excused absences from 3 of our colleagues, Shanna, Jack, and Derek. Is there a motion to excuse those absences?
So moved.
Moved by Steve, seconded by
Second.
Eric. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. That motion carries. Those absences have been excused. Our second item on the agenda is, as you heard in the roll call and may notice around the table, we have a new face, but rather than introducing Mr. Rogers, I'll ask our outgoing colleague, Lansing Township Supervisor Maggie Sanders, to introduce our new board member from Lansing Township. Maggie?
I am happy to introduce Ed Rogers. He is a 40-year resident of Lansing Township. He is a former Ingham County prosecutor, a former administrative law judge for the state of Michigan, and the former director of the Bureau of Services for Blind Persons for the state of Michigan as well. So he's got a long history of public service, a long history of working with the disability community, which I think was an important aspect when appointing him to this board. I know we have a lot in the disability community. We provide a lot of services with SpecTran. So I thought that this would be a great opportunity for him to serve and kind of represent that community as well. So I'll let him say hi quick also, but.
Hello. I'm also a former Lansing school teacher
Oh,
before I
yes.
went to
I
law
forgot about
school,
that.
so.
Very good.
So
Welcome, Mr. Rogers. We're very much looking
Please,
forward to
Ed.
you having serving on the board. And Maggie, we appreciate your service on the board, and we'll make sure to have you back to appropriately recognize your time on the board here in the future. So thank you both. My third item is just a quick note. When we approved committee assignments earlier this year, I noted that the change in board personnel was going to necessitate some changes in committee assignments. This evening's change will necessitate further changes in the future, but for now, there's a vacancy on our audit committee and work to be done there. So the chair's recommendation is that we appoint Chelsea Dollar to fill that vacancy, and I would ask for a motion to approve that appointment. Moved by Phil, seconded by Kelly. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. That motion carries, which brings us now to agenda item number 4, our Chief Executive Officer's report. Brad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Rogers. I look forward.
Please, Ed.
Well, I'm sorry, sir. We're gonna have to get this straight right now. No way I'm ever calling you Ed. It's not how my grandmother raised me. Start getting the record. Anyway, welcome, sir.
Mr. Rogers was my dad.
yeah.
He also went to Bowling Green State University, which is where I went, so.
Oh.
So welcome, sir, and
Thank you.
we'll do an orientation with you in the near future. I look forward to having robust conversations about transit service. First and foremost on our mind today, I want to address the Code Blue. I know there's been some discussion. I had this on my agenda to talk about this. This dates back several years when I first was introduced to the word vortex and what it meant and how cold it actually got. So when preparing for weather like this, we've been in touch not only with the mayor's office, but we, through operations, Lolo's office with Human Services downtown, have a AM PM shuttle that takes care of those that need to go to different shelters, warming shelters around the city. And from mid last week until the 18th, we've transported on this is extra service, by the way, 460 folks. So it's very well used. It will be demand driven. I think it's a precursor to looking at how we're going to transport those to different needed services downtown, and we'll get better at it. But know that as we've committed to the mayor and his office, that we will get people to where they need to be. Secondly, some of you may have heard or been involved in the Sick Leave Act policy and its implications. We are well prepared with legal counsel and have addressed that through HR. We are compliant. We are compliant. Yes, we are compliant. Should also give a shout out to Commissioner Barber, who in a rare occurrence, we both just came from the E-Tran meeting. And the reason we delayed that a week so that we had them both on the same day was to address this issue. So council changed the policy and we are currently compliant until the legislature makes changes, but we will keep you abreast of this and how it affects CATA and the employees. We're obviously in touch with our union, and anyone that's represented by a CBA is not affected by this at this point. I did mention the mayor. We met with the mayor and 3 of his cabinet members last week with as things have gotten exciting downtown near the CTC and equipment rolling in, and Lansing Housing Commission announced their new apartments across the street. It's going to get real busy down there, and we have 400 buses a day topping out in that transit center. So we're looking at parking, we're looking at bus only lanes, we're looking at the pedestrian walkability between those blocks, and really setting the tone for how we're going to build a neighborhood down there. And we're very excited about that. The mayor and his cabinet are very supportive of that. And we will keep you abreast of those activities moving forward. I did say Lansing Housing Commission. You saw the news this week that they're putting in a lot of units down there. We've committed to being a great partner and welcoming them. They're already in the neighborhood, but broadening out and having a partnership of passes in those units and how people can best use transit. So I have a coffee set up with Doug Fleming, who is the executive director of the Housing Commission. We spoke with Doug last year, and we're tentatively looking at combining projects. That didn't work out, but our combined mission for the public remains the same, and being good neighbors to all the public and working together is strong, and we will report back on that soon. And finally, tomorrow morning, I meet with the new supervisor at Delta Township, and the specific agenda item is potential millage on the ballot for sometime this year. This is the E-Tran Regional Coordination Study, which was passed last fall, supported by this board. We have, as I have been telling the new commissioner as well as the E-Tran board, we have about 7 months before the expiration of the interlocal agreement with Eaton County. And so this is an important meeting tomorrow, and I will give you an update on that when I learn more. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Brad. Questions or comments for Brad on his report? All right, seeing none, we'll move to agenda item number 5, which is our proposed consent agenda. This evening, that includes 8 items for the board's consideration. Those are the approval of the minutes of the January 15th board meeting, the approval of the minutes of the January 15th board retreat, the treasurer's report for December 2024, architectural and engineering services at 511 South Washington Avenue contract, the purchase of 1 29-foot shopping bus from Gehring, the armored courier service and cash handling processing equipment contract, the disadvantaged business enterprise program, the award of a contract for new website development, design, and maintenance services. And that concludes the consent agenda. Is there any item on the consent agenda that any member of the board wishes to have removed from the consent agenda to our discussion agenda? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? Moved by Mark. Is there a second? Seconded by Steve. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. That motion carries. The consent agenda is approved as presented, which brings us to our discussion agenda. This should look familiar to folks. We have on our agenda this evening 1 item, the policy on guidelines of use, viewing, and storage of video and audio surveillance. Second reading. We had this on our prior board meeting for its first reading and discussion, and had some opportunity to discuss it at that time. But let me ask first, in the absence of our policy committee chair, if there are any additional comments from our CEO, Brad.
Only I appreciate your patience when we're dealing with some of these policies. A reminder, in absence of the policy committee chair today, We're going to be meeting every other month. We're going to have a detailed agenda. We're meeting in March, and the first agenda item is to talk about the policy that requires 2 readings of policies. And so it sounds like who's on first, but we're trying to straighten out the process and make this a little more streamlined. And this is the second reading required under the current policy for the video viewing, storage, and audio surveillance. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Brad. Let me ask members of the board if there are any questions on this item before I ask for a motion. All right, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the second and final reading for the adoption of the policy on guidelines for the use, viewing, and storage of video and audio surveillance? Moved by Phil, seconded by Kelly. Any discussion on this item? I'll just put it. Did you have a comment, Mark? All right, I'll just put in one quick note of thanks to the policy committee and staff for their work on this. As Brad mentioned, we will have several of these coming forward in the months to come from the policy committee. But it takes a lot of extra work outside these board meetings for them to do this work. And on issues like this, where they are being proactive, that work is greatly appreciated. So I'll convey that to Shanna personally, but to the other members of the policy committee, thanks for your work. If there's no further discussion, then all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. That motion carries. The policy is approved. Which brings us now to agenda item number 7, old business, which tonight consists of a presentation from our Director of Finance. Brad, did you have introductory comments that you wanted to make here?
Thank you. And some of this is a little bit of camouflage why IT switches over Jim's presentation there. In all seriousness, there is a lot of discussion going on everywhere about federal funding, the lack of federal funding, what's going to happen, cash flow, et cetera. In fact, earlier at the E-Tran meeting, one of the MPO reps were talking about the fact that the FTA is not doing amendments to the TIP right now. That's the Transportation Improvement Program. I want to assure this board as well as the E-Tran board that those anything going on right now, we're in touch with our state, federal lobbyists as well as our organizations that deal directly with the elected officials. We have spoken to FTA Region 5 recently. I speak with the administrator once in a great while. I have her cell phone when we have an issue. So we have plenty of money in the bank. It is not suspended. In fact, what I mentioned was a term called pre-award authority. A lot of these grants have already been put in place. A lot of the spending has already been authorized and we get reimbursed. And so I do not see any concern at this point about what's going on. Now, the word of the day I think Jim is going to tell you is cautious. We need to be cautious about our spending and we need to be cautious about what we're doing next. So are we ready, Mr. IT?
We are very close, sir.
We're very,
10 seconds.
very, very close. I'm still going to turn it over to Jim. Jim?
Okay, just to reiterate what Brad just said, we have not had any issues when we've tried to go through the process of drawing funds down from the FTA, which was something we weren't sure about. From a timing standpoint, we happened to get lucky. We drew $4 million down about 2 days before all the mess started. So, but we have some draws in process and everything appears to be going just fine. So.
Perfect. Thanks for the 10 seconds, Jeff. That was.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. So before I get into the entity-wide things, I just want to talk real briefly about the finance department in specific. Since October 1st, I've had both the finance team and the procurement team that reports to me. Our finance team that you see here on the screen, that's Anita, Tony, Corey, Jen, and Nelson. They do a great job. We've had the same staff for quite a while now. If you recall, a few years ago, we had some new accounting software that you all approved, and we were able to actually reduce some headcount as a result of that. Purchasing team, Nicole is our purchasing contracts manager. She would have been the key person to put that DBE action item through that was on the board's agenda tonight. So it's Nicole, Ashley, and Andrea, and then Greg is our parts and inventory specialist. And I am still learning the ropes about procurement, so that's all I have to say about that. Another item that was on your agenda tonight was new equipment for cash handling. We're pretty excited about this. We've working with Fifth Third. We have some equipment that we've got coming in April that we think is going to really streamline our cash handling process. Essentially, for our customer service agents, they'll just be able to, when they log in for the day, the till will be spit out for them to their beginning till. And everybody will have their own login, et cetera. And then at the end of the shift, they just take whatever they've collected in the drawer, put it back in the machine. They get the receipt. We can compare the receipt to what's in the point of sale system to make sure to line up with all the inventory. And it's a big step forward for us. We think we're going to be able to streamline both the finance team, customer service team processes to make everything better. So that's it for my department specific stuff. So moving on to department cattle-wide information. What was in your packet today? First quarter information. We had revenue of 14.3 million versus a budget of 18 million. That's normal for first quarter for our revenues to be way down. Property taxes haven't been collected yet. You're going to see some slides later on that go into that in more detail. Expenses were pretty much right on the money. However, next slide, please, Dan. We've got some good things and some bad things going on here. Contracted paratransit, we had a big jump in our budget year over year for this year, and we're doing pretty well against our budget. Our ridership is actually pretty much where we thought it would be. So we're picking up some efficiencies because our ridership is kind of where we're budgeted to be, but our expenses are a little bit down. So we've made some gains as far as efficiencies go on contracted paratransit. Fuel and vehicle supplies are a little bit below budget. We got a couple of over budget things too to talk about. Wages, way over budget on an annual basis for the first quarter. The important thing to remember on our wages is that October to December time period is the busiest time of the year for us. We got a lot of extra events, football games, parades, all sorts of things going on. This is something we're definitely keeping an eye on. We should see that level out as we get into once school gets out. We should see that over time go down. The biggest concern area that I've got right now is health insurance. This is actually a complete reversal of what we've had the last few years. We've been 8 and 9% below our estimated healthcare spend through 23 and 24, and that's part of the reason that we're over budget this year, because we were a little bit maybe too aggressive on what our goal was going to be. But it's really flipped in the last 9 months, where we were running 92, 93% of expected, and now we're 108% of expected. So that goes hand in hand with sort of the retiree thing. So you can say, okay, it's only $20,000 on the budget, but we're pretty excited about what we've done to try to get the retiree healthcare cost in line. Starting January 1st, we have a new program set up for our retirees that we worked with ATU on. It really leverages Medicare better than it did before. And we think we could save as much as $500,000 a year compared to what we were doing before. It's too early to tell exactly what that's going to be because it's only been since January 1st. But we're excited that we have some hope that we're going to flatten out that healthcare expense. And then for the actives, you say, okay, what are we doing on that? So our health insurance year, if you will, starts March 1st, goes through February 28th. So we are coming up at the end of our health insurance year. We just had our open enrollment the last 2 weeks for our healthcare for next year. We had very lengthy and productive discussions with ATU, and the goal was to try to have everybody be more accountable for their own healthcare. We incentivized annual physicals. So if you have an annual physical, your weekly participation fee is lower than if you don't have an annual physical. It's not a magic bullet on healthcare, obviously, but we're hoping that over time, those relationships will help us kind of flatten out that healthcare cost trend. So something we're definitely keeping an eye on. Okay, for those of you who were here last month, these next couple slides were part of my presentation last month. Just real quickly, we had a really good year, fiscal 2024. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because you're going to hear about it from our auditors next month. But operating income of 11.9 million. And then when you throw in the capital activity on top of that, we had a gain of almost $13 million. These slides again were in the presentation last month, but just we have a lot of new board members here, and just as a repeat, this is two of our big pots of money, which would be state and federal revenue, and that LBO stands for local bus operating. That's our MDOT money, and you can see our operating percentage was 33.85% of eligible expenses were reimbursed to us in fiscal 2024. And that resulted in over $20 million of urban operating revenue that we received. In addition, we had COVID money. Just again, for those of you who are new, we had at the beginning, during COVID, we had about $60 million of COVID relief money awarded to us. We have been drawing that down over the last several years. We drew down 13.4 million in fiscal 2024. That $15.17 million that you see on fiscal 2025, that is what we have left. We will draw all that down this year. And then for fiscal 2025, also, if you go back real quick, James, you can see our urban operating from the state went down from 33% to 29%. So we're expecting less revenue as a result of that. And then, okay, Dan, fiscal 2026, currently what we've been advised is that the LBO is going to be 26.04%, which is another 3% reduction from this year, which results in another a couple $1 million of revenue lost. And our COVID relief money will be exhausted. And at this point, there's no replacements that we are aware of as far as COVID relief or any other new grant money coming from the federal level. Okay, so that was the bad news. We do have some good news on revenue. Property taxes are really strong, and property taxes is still our number one source of revenue at the agency. So we're still seeing strong growth on our property taxes. In addition to that, our fare box revenues have been above where we had budgeted, and also our interest rates and return on the investments that we have. Those returns have been very strong, and it looks like those interest rates are going to stay solid for a little while. So we are hopeful that that's going to be good. But those two things are smaller in relation to the grant dollars, but they're still significant. Okay, so this is a new set of graphs here that I'm going to try to explain to everybody. Everybody likes graphs when it comes to finance, so we'll try to. Let's start with at the bottom. The black line, is what the board minimum cash. So this is cash and investments. Is what's on the screen, and the black line at the bottom is representative of board policy 212, which is that we are supposed to keep a minimum of 3 months, or if you want to look at it on a percentage basis, 25% of your annual operating expenses. We need to have that on hand at all times, 3 months of expending. So instead of it will fluctuate each year based on what the actual budget is. But so for the purposes of this graph, I'm just using a flat $18 million as the, and you'll see where I'm going with this as we get forward. So this is our cash by month, and this is fiscal 2023. And there's sort of a trend that we have every year. We are right in the middle of our happiest time of the year right now as we are getting all our property tax revenues coming in. You can see the huge spike up in between January and February into March. We sort of level off through the spring months and into the summer when school's out, we don't have as much expense. And then we'll start to decrease down as you go through the fall. And usually our low point is really right around the first of the year for cash and investments. So this is where we stood in fiscal 2023. Fiscal 2024, as I just said, was a really good year. You can see where we're at month by month in fiscal 2024. In the September numbers were about $11 million difference year over year. So we were able to add roughly $1 million a month to cash. So where it gets interesting now is go ahead and fiscal 2025. You see the dotted line represents that I'm starting to guess here, but we do have actual numbers through January. And what you see there is I'm trying to project where I think we're going to be from a cash and investment standpoint. I do think we'll add some money to cash this year, but it's going to be more in the $2 to $3 million range. So that would put us over $40 million in the bank at the end of the year. Okay, next slide. Fiscal 2026, which is what we're here to talk about, is this yellow line. And you can see what the impact is of less LBO, no federal stimulus dollars. So essentially what's happening with fiscal 2026 as we project it right now is that we are going to burn through cash at pretty much the same rate that we put it into the bank and end up the year right around the same place that we were at the end of fiscal 2023. So, and then if we go one more year forward to 2027, based on what we have right now, you can see it starts to get down where we're approaching that or minimum of what we're allowed to do. So, I think that kind of gives a good representation of where we're headed if we stay exactly the way where we're at right now. So, okay, so uncertainties on the budget. Again, with the LBO operating is obviously a big one. We're trying to get there's lobbying efforts that are happening to try to get those numbers up, but right now we're using the number that we have, which is the 26%. We do have some federal and state grants on hand that have already been awarded to us. About $3.5 million. Most of those are related to some of the microtransit projects we have going on. Some of those will be spent in 25, some of them will be spent in 26. As we mentioned, we haven't had any issues at the time as far as drawing FTA funds. The other piece of the state process would be if for some reason there was an impasse at the state level where the budget didn't get passed in a timely basis, we're going to be okay. We have enough money in the bank where if something like that were to happen, we'll be just fine. The additional regional funding is what Brad mentioned as far as with Eaton County. We don't know exactly what's going to be happening with that. So for those of you who have been here for a few years, these next slides are sort of regurgitated slides from past years. I apologize. There's a bunch of things on here that are hard to read, but essentially what these are is this slide is our different revenue components and sort of what we project to go for the next 5 years. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these because they're sort of beside the point. If you remember what was on those graphs that preceded us. So go ahead, Dan, to the next one. Again, this is expenses and sort of projecting, okay, if we think salaries and wages are going to go up 3.5% a year, et cetera, et cetera. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is the slide that we've had for ever since I've been here that Pat used to show. And it's always had the cliff that's a few years out. And so the cliff is a little closer now. You can see we've got the mismatch between the blue line and the red line as far as if projecting out that red line with expenses is growing faster than that revenue line that has as far as, if you project you've got 60 million for one and 70 for the other, and each of them increased by 3%, well, the gap is just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. So obviously this is not a sustainable situation. We're not going to run out of money in 2028 if that happens. So, but it's just a picture of to show where we've been and where we are headed as far as what we know right now today. So, okay, so what is the plan? So we're waiting to see kind of what happens with LBO. We're waiting to see what happens on the regional level. But I'd say standing here today, it's more likely than not that our revenue mix is going to be more around 58 to 63 million going forwards, as opposed to the low 70 millions that we've had here the last couple of years. And so we'll need to adjust those expenses back down. If from the graph that we just had up, that orange line needs to basically be laying on top of the blue line. There can't be that gap there. So we will, we have started looking at what that might look like, but we're just in the beginning stages of that. So the plan is basically we've got enough money in the bank that we're going to kind of wait and see over these next 6 to 9 months, and then go from there. And that's it. I'm happy to take questions.
Bill?
Given that $500,000 deficit for healthcare for the first quarter of the year, what do you attribute that to? Because annualized, that's a $2 million gap in health bill.
Yes, and it's purely claims experience, and the claims really flipped about last May. We started to see where we were running, pretty much what we would expect to see, and then all of a sudden it just really has taken off. So it's just pure claims experience. It's too big of a jump for it to be just one or two individuals in our pool, So it's gone from where we were, we play the Blue Cross bill every month every week, and it's it was, when I first started, unusual for it to be under 100,000 or over 100,000 in a week, and now it's almost always over 100,000 every week. So we're like I said, we're about 108% of what we expect it to be. So I don't think that $2 million is where we're headed, but it's something we're definitely keeping an eye on.
Go ahead, Phil. Finish.
Are we in a self-insurance pool? Is that what essentially we're telling me we're paying premiums based on?
Yeah, we're self-insured. We have reinsurance for catastrophic, but we're self-insured as far as healthcare goes. So so if an individual claim over 150,000, that's when the reinsurance would kick in.
I think Brad has a quick piece of additional information, then we'll go to Stephen.
Sorry about that. Phil, if you recall last month, we kind of gave a shout out to the union because we had formed this healthcare committee where we were able to sit down and they had skin in the decision-making game, and we were able to get close to $500,000 savings in that process. And I bring that to your attention because, again, if you looked at our healthcare plan, Blue Cross Blue Shield and the deductibles, you're not going to find it anywhere else. So we've got some tough decisions to make in the future. And I hesitate to say we have the Cadillac plan, but we have a very lucrative plan, and we've incentivized to go over to the HSA. But our PPO is pretty nice. And so we're going into a contract here where we have to make those decisions. And the positive is that they're at the table helping us make those decisions now. So I'm encouraged that we're not going to end up with that. We've got a plan moving forward where we're not going to be taking these hits repeatedly.
Thank you.
Steve?
I think that probably answered my question, but if you talked about the agreement to make changes, when do those take effect? I mean, these costs are based on the plan before what you've recently agreed to, am I correct?
Yeah, exactly. So we kind of have a reset March 1st. The new participation fees that we pay each week will change on that date. And
so
that's the biggest change really, is the participation fees.
In my mind, we're probably better served by not sweating January and February and looking as to what happens once we start the new plan in March. I mean, we could be, we should be in better shape.
Yes, that's like I said, these changes that we're making to get everybody to the doctor, you're not going to see immediate results, but we hope over the long term, we can drag down that cost increase that everybody is seeing throughout the country of, 6, 7, 8, 9% a year and try to flatten that out as best we can.
Thanks, Stephen. Other questions for Jim on his report? Go ahead, Brad.
Mr. Chairman, a quick summary of this based on last month and for the new people attending, or if you weren't here last month, we went through each of the budgets and that retreat by policy for the board is to kind of set the tone and give us direction to put a budget together, which we will deliver to you by the end of June. What we started doing a couple of years ago, and you see Jim here today, is he saves the fun stuff, the finance stuff for the second meeting because it just was so long and involved. And so it's a quick rehashing of where we're going and a reminder on the service side and kind of a summary of where we're going with this is that we're not going to increase service. We're not going to significantly increase the budget. We're kind of holding our own this year. Until we know what's going to happen. And there's really two reasons for that. One, we don't know what's going to happen. Number two, it's very hard to pull service down, change the expectations of the public and do anything drastic and then say, oh, we have money now. And as you know, the governor's transportation bill, the Fix the Roads bill that she's put forward includes a 10% increase of the CTF. That is a dedicated fund where the local bus operating, which Jim is talking about, gets its line item and its money. So the governor's already put forward more money for that. We just don't know. So we're trying to manage public expectations, and it's very hard, like a cruise ship, to take things down, start them back up again, as we saw in the pandemic. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Brad. And thank you, Jim, for your presentation. As Jim mentioned, that one particular graph where we see cash and invested funds bottom out is one that at some point in the future, we've seen at every one of these budget presentations for as long as I've been on the board, which is 16 years now. And I think the one thing it undergirds, and it's a thing I want to flag as a compliment to staff, is how we deal with that and how we continue to push that cliff out depends a lot on what happens at that building behind us, a lot about what happens in DC, a lot about these regional conversations, what the decisions this board makes in terms of service levels. The cliff can be frightening, but I think being proactive like this, where we're talking years in advance about what those various scenarios look like, is exactly what we should be doing. I would love to see some version of the governor's proposal come into being where there's $250 million for local bus operating that doesn't exist right now. But sitting here today, if you're capable of guaranteeing that that's going to happen or have any idea what the legislature is going to do, then I would love to hear about it. But I don't think any of us can do that. So we've just got to keep this process up between the staff and the board, monitoring the situation and adjusting accordingly. So thanks to Jim and Brad and the rest of the staff for their diligence in this space. It's appreciated. All right. There's no other noticed old business to come before the board this evening. Likewise, no noticed new business for the board, which brings us to our second and final public comment opportunity. This is the time we set aside during each of our meetings to take comment on any item related to CATA, not limited to our agenda items. I make the same requests as before. Please consider filling out a blue card to assist our secretary. Limit your comments to 3 minutes. We'll have a timer to assist you with that. I'll call the commenters in the order in which I've received the blue cards and then ask if there's anyone else who wishes to offer comment. We're going to begin again at this second opportunity with Deb Parrish. Deb?
I just want to say excellent presentation, Jim. I stayed awake through the whole thing. The contracted paratransit, $156,000 under budget, but are there services up to par? It seems like there's a lot of walk-ons onto the buses lately. And we'll be celebrating Gloria Banks' life on Saturday. at Penway Church of God. Friends are encouraged to gather at 10 a.m. to remember Glow. The service will be held at 11 a.m. and you are invited to stay for lunch and that will follow. And hopefully her friend makes potato salad because it's really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Our next commenter will be Daniel Black. Mr. Black?
Thanks. This is the first time in this room with your auxiliary headphone unit kind of thing. And just to say, it works excellent. No problem that you drew the short straw on which room to rent. It works excellent. Thank you. My comment is relating to taking a fixed route number 3 out to the west side and connecting with E-Tran, which was seamless and excellent. My only challenge was the requirement for E-Tran to have cash. And I made the decision to take the trip a day in advance, if not less. And I was scrambling because I'm a debit and credit card user with no cash generally in my pocket to find $2 or $3 in cash to take that trip. And I would, if there's a possibility, encourage you to consider multiple forms of payment, whether it be debit, credit, tokens, a card, an E-Tran card, or even an E-Tran CATA seamlessly. It sounds like with that thumb that it's in the works. Great. Okay. Enough said.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who wishes to offer public comment at this second and final opportunity this evening? All right, seeing none, then there being no further business to come before the CATA Board of Directors, we are adjourned at 4:49 p.m. Thank you, everyone.